Okay, in theory, we're streaming now. In theory. Let me really quickly just make sure that that's true. And that the thing I clicked. Yes, good. It is working. Okay, good. Yes.
Yeah, you are.
Yes, I did it. Okay.
Can you tell, guys, that it's been an evening of technical difficulties?
Did you know, guys, they got rid of Hangouts on Air, which is what we've been using to stream on YouTube for the last decade?
No. Someone's going to comment and be like, guys, I did that like 3 years ago.
I
know. You're like, well.
Oops. Ah.
That's how consistently we booktube, friends.
Quality content creators. So,
yeah.
I don't know if I didn't have a way to change the title of the stream here. I tried to do it earlier. You may have seen it. But tonight we wanted to be talking about cancel culture, ethical support, and navigating problematic favorites. In particular, obviously this is sparked by all of the discussions that are going on around J.K. Rowling online right now. In the weird happenstance that you have not heard, J.K. Rowling is a TERF. Basically, she a couple years ago tweeted some stuff that was kind of iffy on trans issues, and people were kind of like, that's a bit weird, but maybe she misunderstood it. Then this past spring, she very clearly posted that she was against trans folks. And now her new book that's coming out involves a man dressing up as a woman in order to kill them, which even furthers that stance that, yes, okay, J.K. Rowling does not like trans folks, and if you want to know our stance on this subject, trans rights are human rights. Trans folks are folks. Trans women are women. Trans men are men. That's, that's where we stand on that side of the issue, which really should not be an issue. But, there's that thing. And this has sparked a lot of discussion and questions on what to do regarding Harry Potter, which for a lot of folks our age was very instrumental and foundational in their, lives in general. We have friends who are very Harry Potter centered to this day. They still, love it, reread it, have merch, all of that stuff. And we wanted to come in and talk about probably, some of the questions that a lot of folks have been having, and possibly some of the ways that we can navigate a world where now as adults we get to make the choice and sort of figure out how we want to support or not support people. Yeah?
Yeah. And particularly also, not just as readers, because, obviously we read even if we can't booktube consistently. But also, I am a librarian who buys books for a public library in a children's section. And Michaela has gone back to work at a Barnes & Noble, so she is in book retail. And so how do you stay on top of all of it? How do you manage it? Because I think how I phrased it to Michaela earlier is that I am ethically confused, not about what to do in the case of finding this stuff out, that is clear, but how do you stay on top of it all and make sure that you're doing right by the people that you're serving, whether it's a customer in a bookstore or a patron in a library?
So obviously, when it comes down to your own personal stuff, it's pretty easy to say, hey, I think trans folks are folks. J.K. Rowling is actively doing stuff that is harming folks. Giving her money is giving her more of a platform to continue harming folks or to continue spreading harmful ideas, etc. So I'm not going to support her, whether that be I'm no longer going to buy licensed merchandise, whether it means that you're not going to buy the new video game that's coming out next year that a lot of folks would have loved a decade ago. If that video game came out a decade ago, we all would have been on top of that. But it's coming out in 2021, and we're having this lovely discussion. That's easy. It's pretty easy to say, hey, this is my stance, I'm not going to support. it's harder when I'm in a bookstore that sells hundreds of dollars worth of Harry Potter merchandise, licensed Harry Potter merchandise.
Hundreds? I'm like...
Thousands.
Thousands and thousands.
Thousands and thousands. My store in particular, maybe hundreds, but the company as a whole, thousands and thousands. When parents come in to buy Harry Potter books for their kids still. I don't really have the ability as a person who's the face of a company to say, don't buy that. I pretty much have to give the customer what they want because it's nonpartisan. If we're going to sell Trump books and we're going to sell, you just don't get a choice in that matter. Like, I have to let that person purchase it even if I'm against it. I can, however, if somebody comes up to me in the kids department asking for a recommendation, not recommend Harry Potter. I can recommend any number of other things. So that is a way that I can sort of have a little bit of more control on that. And I know Gretchen, too, she can recommend or bring more sources into her library that would help be voices on the other side or help other marginalized groups. Like, I'm sure there are books by trans folks for all ages that you guys have just to have, and you can recommend them, whether or not they're specifically about trans issues, but just by trans folks in general. So recommending those is a good way to sort of feel maybe a little bit better about the ethics there. If you're like me and you had, like, my Twitter bio used to say Slytherin in it. I just took that out of my Twitter bio because I don't even want to passively be sort of representing something that I disagree. Even if Harry Potter, was a pretty big thing, like, I just took it out of my Twitter bio. I don't want it to be talking about it and giving it more traction than it deserves, pretty much, right? Like, even passively like that.
I mean, so for me, I mean, I've read Harry Potter, I've watched all the movies, I've gone to the theme park. They already have that money, I can't get it back. But for me, like, I know that... And I mean,
like, there's Harry Potter. It's on my shelf. Like, I have it here. And that's a second copy of it. Because I had the hardbacks growing up. Like, I bought that box set 5 years ago. So. Yeah.
Like, but for me, I know that it's not a super hardship not to buy anything else.
Yeah.
Not to engage with it anymore. Like, it's not my particular, like, massive fandom. And obviously, if, you got meaning from Harry Potter, the author is dead. Obviously, those books are, and that's like an English saying, not like me, like, I don't know, murdering J.K. Rowling with my words. No. I don't know. But, you can still get meaning from those books, and recognizing now that they were already problematic when she wrote them. For various issues. But the thing about this is that you can't miss it, right? You can't miss this conversation. You can't miss people talking about it because it is Harry Potter, because it is so internationally, globally impactful. Like, there's not a corner of this globe that is not somehow, I feel like, touched by Harry Potter, even just tangentially.
Yeah.
But I was just telling Michaela before this stream started that I read Miss of Avalon for a class by Marion Zimmer Bradley. That book was very influential for an entire generation of feminists and just fantasy readers. And I was reading something the other day about Marion Zimmer Bradley and her husband abusing children. And the article that I was reading was like, yeah, this all came out forever ago, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at it like, but I didn't know this, right? And like, when Me Too blew through a whole bunch of authors and was like, a whole bunch of things were coming out about different people. I could tell you like a couple of names that came out of that, but can I tell you all of them? Do I know? And so for me, as someone who buys multiple collections in a library, so for example, I just bought 65 new picture books and 40 new JFIC novels. Like, ethically, how, if I don't even have the time to, I barely have the time to read all the reviews of these books, how do I go about making sure I'm doing my ethical duty from an author's standpoint, right? Because the reviews might tell me if there's something problematic within the pages, right? But that's all they're going to touch on. And some review sources are better than others. Obviously, I do my due diligence and check out the ones that I trust and the ones that care about inclusion and diversity issues.
And just on that note, if you can, and you're not sure whether something has problematic stuff, if there is a group represented in the book, try and read Own Voices reviews. So if it's got Native Americans in it, try and find a Native American reviewing the book. If it's got African folks, black folks in it, try and hear black voices about it, trans, gay, queer, whatever it is. If you hear an Own Voices review, they're more than likely going to be able to touch on any problematic issues. Again, one person can't stand for the entire community, but if you are only listening to the voices of folks who aren't representative of the problems that could arise, you're definitely going to have a lower chance of hearing about any of that stuff. Just
and like that's why like you even have to like look into your review source, right?
Yep.
So you have to know, like, I know that some of my review sources take that into account. Like they try really hard if they have a certain reviewer on staff to match that book with to do that, and some of them don't. And so, you know, if you're only reading this one review source and they don't, I mean, you have to know that. But it's just like, I mean, this crazy amount of time that you have to spend, especially right now. I mean, my library is incredibly understaffed. I'm now buying for 5 or 6 collections when I used to buy for 1. Plus, like, trying to do my actual day job.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, I'm trusting the fact that I am getting enough news to like have these things cross my mind. But again, I feel like I'm just finding out new things.
And also the farther away from when something breaks, the quieter that is. So one of the things that I bring up a lot is how I found out that Orson Scott Card, the author of Ender's Game, was actively supporting anti-queer, anti-gay stuff before I read Ender's Game, so that when I was going to read Ender's Game, I was able to read it from the library rather than purchase a copy, doing, again, this thing where I was ethically trying not to support with money an author that was doing something that I felt was reprehensible. But there are people who don't know that, and it could be because it's been so long since that sort of news was news. And there's going to be a whole generation of folks talking about the book, talking about the movie, talking about whatever else that don't necessarily remember when all of that stuff came out, or didn't hear it when it first came out, even. So, thinking about that too, where, like, it's easy to be on top of stuff when it's very large and topical, but the farther away from that news break is, the quieter and the smaller that's going to seem.
Well, and I also think that to a certain extent, you know, people are leery of cancel culture. Like, cancel culture is at once very, very important, but it also has moments where it gets people it maybe shouldn't be canceling.
There's this discussion of, like, once you're bad, you're always bad, where like some people are saying, well, if somebody tweeted something racist in 2011 and they haven't tweeted anything racist since then, are they still racist? And that's a good question. Like, Gretchen, come back. Come back to me.
I am right here.
Oh, you disappeared. Okay, hello.
Hello.
Did I disappear? Oh, goodness. All right. Internet quality.
I know. Are we still streaming? We good?
I believe so. Let me check.
Super.
Let me make sure. Yes,
I don't know what's happening.
According to this, we are. I don't know, man.
Everything just shut down. Well, because I was thinking in particular, since we're still streaming and everything is fine, technical difficulties are not a thing. These are not the droids you're looking for. So I was thinking in particular, when I did my thesis last year, I was looking at, it wasn't called cancel culture then as part of this, but like Twitter storms that came up around books. And so, for example, one of them was a book written by an Asian author who like came to America, but like was born actually in Asia, so not Asian American in that sense. And she wrote a fantasy book that was an allegory for something that she experienced in her home country. But when it was translated to an American setting, it looked like she was dealing with slavery in the terms of that we think of it, which is African American, typically based slavery, a la plantation, Civil War, etc. And so people attacked that book for not dealing with that in the way that they expected it to be dealt with. And it didn't even occur to her because that's not what she was talking about at all. So in that case, like, context matters. And her book was initially not going to be released, and I believe now it either is or is going to be, because I just pushed it back. But like that's in, like, it's a yes, we want books that deal with slavery the correct way, that don't, you need that, obviously. And she was not an African American writer.
Nope.
Writing about the topic that they thought that she was writing about, but it's that kind of like weird, like, context matters, but you need to take the time to do the research and like figure out what's going on. And we've
discussed, I think we did a live stream a couple of years ago where we discussed issues with bandwagoning on like one person's review. When one person has read a book and says something, and then 100 people jump on and say, well, this person said this, without having read the source material. And if there is a weird thing that happens here where there's something misconstrued or whatever else, we want to be able to go to folks and believe that what they're saying is true, that yes, okay, so somebody is saying this situation are problematic because XYZ, but then when everybody gangs up on it, some of that initial discussion sort of gets lost, and it just becomes we're angry at somebody or like you no longer have those receipts, so to speak, about what's happening, and that can be problematic in its own right, especially with reviews and reviewers. And we've discussed ourselves on things like Goodreads, where people can all go and rate the book 1 star and like really mess up the quote-unquote algorithm, none of which have read the book, none of which know what's going on, based on something they hear on Twitter, and they may not even have seen the original review that was bad-mouthing it. They just know that everybody else is doing it, so they're doing it, and that's kind of weird and problematic in its own right. I don't know. That's another aspect of it.
And at the same time, like, I don't want people who will be harmed by the content of the book being like, well, I have to read it to discover whether or not it is true, obviously. But it's just like, I don't know, I feel like so many of these situations, like, you're just trying to do your best, but especially as a white person,
yes,
like, for me, like, I'm just like, oh, well, is my best actually the best that I can offer, or is there something that I have missed? Is there more that I could be doing? Just because for me, I could just be like, oh, well, I'll just check it out for myself and see. I'm white, I'm straight, I'm cis, like, the only thing I got female, like, that's the only box I tick. So, like, I have that privilege to say, oh, well, I could just check it out for myself. In a perfect world where I have time. I don't have time.
No one has time to do it.
No, I don't have the, ain't nobody got time for that. Like,
yeah, it's hard.
So, but I live in, like, literal fear of not having done my due diligence for a book, especially because I buy, like I said, I buy picture books, I buy board books, I buy JFic, that I don't do my due diligence, and I support something that's harmful. And
the other thing that I guess that sort of feeds into this is the other week I sent Gretchen a link to a website based off of Leena's video where she was talking about alternatives to Goodreads, where there was that website, beta.storygraph.com, yes. I believe is the full website, which if you haven't seen Leena's video, I'll link it down below that you can watch that and listen to the owner of that talk about it, and you can also go there and sign up and use it, but that they were implementing tagging of trigger warnings into books so that it would be really easy to click on a book's page and see what people are, tagging it as possibly having sexual assault or racism or misogyny or whatever else is going on in there. It has the ability to tag it and for you to look and see, and then if you want to do more research. So websites like that, I think, are going to help us a lot moving forward, where you have the ability to take 1 second to type the book into the story graph, pull it up, and see if it is tagged with anything. And then if you want to, then to also look at larger reviews of stuff. But that only works well if a lot of people are using the website, right? Where you're getting like that holistic view of a lot of people are saying, hey, yes, this book had a rape scene in it, and I didn't know going into it, and I really don't like reading that, and now I had to read it. But you can avoid it if it's something that you don't want to read or that could potentially harm you, which is always your prerogative. If you are worried that something might harm you, or if you're questioning it, I think we would always urge you to err on the side of caution if there's any reason to question it, right?
Yeah, there are other books. There are other books.
There are always other books.
I mean, I just going back to like when I was younger, and I was like, well, if I started this book and I don't like it, I have to finish it.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah. And that's controversial here on BookTube, or well, or maybe not. I mean, there are reviewers who discuss, DNFing stuff. I don't know. That's a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing that you can think about and look to. And if you hadn't heard about the story graph, that might be a website to look into if you ever want to.
Because there's another ethical conundrum, right? Like, how many of us use Goodreads? And like, I was like, there is nothing else. There is just Goodreads. And I could have lived the rest of my life thinking that. But Michaela linked me to a video that she watched about Storygraph, which is, I think, when it's out of beta, going to be way better than Goodreads is. And it's also run by, at least half by a woman of color, and not by
Amazon.
Baboon.
I know that a lot of us have been trying to say things like, if you can support local businesses, shop using things like local bookstores. I work at Barnes & Noble, and I'm going to spend money at Barnes & Noble, and I always have, and I prefer to do that than going to Amazon if it's possible. But keep in mind that Amazon owns a lot of stuff that you might not know that it owns. Like, most people know that Amazon owns Audible, but some people may still not know that Amazon owns Goodreads, because it's not like it says under Goodreads an Amazon company or anything, and it hasn't really changed a whole lot. You could just be thinking it's its own thing, and that's hard to, in a way. Amazon owns a lot of things that you may not necessarily see.
And Amazon also bought a lot of things that they then killed.
Yeah.
Like
purposefully.
Safari.
Yeah. They bought it. Yeah.
Yeah, to keep people at Goodreads, so that there was not another ethical option. So I feel like I just need to protect Storygraph with my entire person.
We need to push it and let more people know about it, and we also need to hope that the folks who own it, and based on what she said in that interview, I don't think she's planning to sell to Amazon.
Yeah.
Even if Amazon offers her $1 million billion.
I mean, listen, there's a certain $1 billion of dollars where I would be like, you mean I would no longer be in debt?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, she did seem very committed. But I do think that is all part of this, as we become more ethically aware. And part of this is, me also growing up as a person.
Yes.
But I think we're coming into more of an age where being more ethically aware is becoming more and more important.
And I think especially looking at Gen Z as sort of the first generation of folks who've grown up with access to the internet and therefore access to a much wider community and the ability to hear marginalized voices much easier. Can you imagine growing up with something like TikTok when we were kids? Because
No, I wasn't allowed to even have a phone.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have a phone until high school.
They were all corded.
I didn't have a phone until high school, and I didn't have a smartphone until college. So, like,
I had to. My parents ran. I'm so old. My parents ran a business, and so our internet was connected to the business line, and so you could only use the internet in off business hours.
We're
both only like learning CDs, like Leapfrog.
Yes, Leapfrog. Hell yeah, Leapfrog. Into it. I still go back and play Zumbinis. Let me play my weird, dumb logic puzzle games. Anyway, so like that's helping because it makes the world much more accessible. Anyway, so you're able to hear from marginalized voices. The hope also is that folks of our generation, folks of Gen Z, are going to continue to pass on positive stuff of like supporting marginalized groups, and that because we have these views that we are able to also push that on to our children, not push it onto them, but like grow them in a sense where they don't have to learn at the age of 26 about small things that they're doing that are racist, that hopefully they can be actively correcting themselves from the get-go.
I mean, actively. I do think, though, as the more that we're learning, I mean, as has become clear very recently, is that even though the internet is a big, wide world, it is becoming increasingly siloed based on, you know, pegs and holes that they are. So even though you have access to all of this information on the internet, like I said, I have to go looking for it, and it's not just because my cookies have decided that, you know, this isn't something that I care about. You know, it's just that the internet is so siloed that if you do, you know, live in a conservative community, or like, you know, you say certain things. I mean, I had a friend today mention a website, like a task managing website, in a Google in our Google chat on our work email. I opened YouTube on my phone, on my personal YouTube account, and it was an ad
for that.
Yeah. So like, I mean, this is like cross, like, and that's not even my personal laptop. Like, I don't know how all of this cross connected.
Always listening.
Yeah.
Always.
So while I also agree that people have access to more and more of this information, I actually think that it, in certain cases, is becoming harder and harder to find.
And that's conversations that folks have been having. The folks that have been having English, I can speak it. Folks have been having on like things like the YouTube algorithm suppressing things. Folks on TikTok talking about the TikTok algorithm suppressing things. Everybody knows that these algorithms only show us stuff, or in theory show us stuff that is aligned with our interests, and that every once in a while something will break through. So I don't know. It's hard. I guess what we're saying is do your best to put out into the world your values through your support, whether it be through money stuff or through promoting something that you think is good. If you have any sort of platform, not that our platform is very large. When we talk about the story graph, somebody who may not have heard about it will maybe go and look at it.
I mean, just from you saying it to me, I told a group of my friends at the library. They're now all joining it, and we're putting it out in like our readers advisory to our community. And that's, you know, it's not a wide audience, but from Michaela just telling me, I've now got like 10 other people, at least, signed up on it. So like, you know, be the change, man. I don't know.
No matter how small, be the change, and try and go vote. If you live in America, please go vote, because obviously we're in a very problematic time. This is the bad place, and we can only make it better if we vote in
Although
November.
I do still wish there was an algorithm that I could say, I have already requested my ballot.
Yeah.
Please stop asking me to register. I am registered.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Although I did I saw somebody say that they voted in the primary a couple months ago and they checked to see if they were still registered and they were no longer registered and they don't know how they became unregistered. So maybe
check.
Just double check that. If you're like, no, I'm definitely registered to vote, just double check real quick. Like once, it's not hard. Oh, there goes my Bunnabee. He's behind me.
I know, you got a bun and I've got a cat. We've got mascots.
Mascots.
I moved my camera so you could see her sleep. There you go.
Yeah, so, hey, we're trying to do our part by talking about it, and no, we don't have all the answers, and no, like, there isn't a way to be 100% correct all of the time, but there is a way to try to continue and better yourself and better what you're doing. So,
and it's almost better that you think, I mean, it's always better to think that you don't have the answer, because A, you never actually do.
No.
And B, like, me being constantly aware of this as a thing that I'm thinking about means that I'm constantly doing the work.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that I'm like, I'm probably doing fine, and then I just like drop a whole bunch of balls.
Yeah.
So
just assume that you're doing something wrong. Always assume that you're doing something wrong. And be sad.
Work really hard.
Work really hard. Be constantly tired and sad. It's perfect. We did it. Love it.
Isn't that the motto of 2020?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be constantly tired and sad.
Yeah.
Please scream inside your hearts.
Quality. So, yeah. How long have we been talking? Probably like half an hour, yeah?
Yeah, it's half an hour.
Okay.
Minus some technical difficulties.
Minus slight technical difficulties. Yeah, we're trying to do stuff again, and I don't think that we are going to be as consistent as like either of us would like. Just in general, both of us have real life and job and other things going on, and we don't get paid to do this, and there's nobody who's going to fire us if we don't upload a video on time. So I don't think that we're ever going to be the consistent YouTubers, and I think honestly that we'll be a lot happier if we're just like, hey, we're gonna do what we want to do and try and make content more than once a year, but maybe not 3 videos a week, like would be the goal of everything.
I mean, because technically we could fire each other, but if you were like, I didn't upload that video because I was tired and sad, I'd be like, oh my god, me too.
I was gonna edit that, and then I didn't. I decided to eat cookies and watch Monk.
I'd be like, I'm so proud of you, you ate food.
Pretty much literally how life is.
Yeah.
But I hope you guys are doing okay. Wear masks in public. Don't go in public unless you need to or have to. I know it's hard, because especially here in America, it feels like it's somewhat back to normal. It is not. We're still in the middle of a pandemic.
Because you're done with coronavirus does not mean coronavirus is done with you.
Yeah, so be aware of that. Don't do stupid things. Like, don't go to the movies. Just, you don't have to. You're okay. And you don't have to. Just don't do that. Vote. And remember that people are people, and respect people, and try to be empathetic. Yeah, so that's what we wanted to talk about. We're trying. We will sometimes fail, but we'll do our best to course correct and continue and keep trying to do better. And we hope that you do too. So, talk to you again soon. Bye. You know what helps?